Welcome to the Energetic Psyche, a weekly podcast hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrian Campbell, where we talk about real life, challenge assumptions, and explore different ways of being in the world. This week, I have Winston Cortez Ward, Army veteran, founder and CEO of Cortez Training Center, and full-time graduate student, to share about his lived experience dealing with G6PD, a widely known and under-researched and devastating genetic disorder that affects people of color around the world. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Energetic Psyche. This is episode 20, G6PD, the Silent Crisis. And tonight with me is Winston Cortez Ward, an Army veteran, founder and CEO of the Cortez Training Center, and a full-time graduate student. So Cortez was with me back for episode 5. So like a long time ago, it feels like now, right? Well, yeah, 15 weeks ago. And one of the things that came up during your episode was the genetic disorder G6PD. And in our conversations off of, the podcast, we, decided it was important enough to have its own episode. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, I think we need to talk more about this. So I'm really glad to have you back. And I'm really glad to have you join me to talk about this just genetic disorder that affects so many people.
Yeah, I'm super excited. And I'm so fortunate to have a friend like you and a professional like you that's wants to, raise awareness on all kind of controversial issues or unknown issues, and this is the perfect one to do that. And I'm so driven to get this out and raise awareness about this.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'm honored. I'm absolutely honored to be able to be in a position like this. So I appreciate you very much. So we talked about your upbringing a little bit back in episode 5, but we didn't go into your experience with G6PD too much because we knew we were going to do this episode. So why don't we start out there again, and because I know your experience with it started from birth because it's a genetic disorder, right? So I'll let you take the stage and let us know how it went, how you found out about it, all of that good stuff.
Absolutely. So, at birth, and we're going to get into all the details with the information we're going to be presenting later. All the details on who it affects and how it affects, but basically, not only with my upbringing, my rough upbringing as a minority in Chicago in the 80s, that has its own kind of context within itself. So, it was middle of the drug epidemic, and we even talked about the systematic stuff and the governmental stuff, all that stuff. That's another episode too. But I was born right in the heart of that, and so born not only kind of with the we were talking about kind of relating it to fetal alcohol syndrome, like when children are born with alcohol in their system, or their parent was using drinking alcohol while they were born and stuff, and it almost it has the child is born with a dependency, and so they have to do things like giving them medications and drugs and things to try to help reverse the effects and symptoms and all that stuff. So it was virtually the same for me, but with drugs. And so born with drugs in my system, obviously that has its own implications with your health and, survivability. And so I was already sick due to that. And then as they were administering these life-saving drugs, I have G6PD. So whether or not they knew or not, which I don't believe they did, I'm sure some of the medications and things were causing adverse effects. So what we call in the health field contraindications. So
Yeah.
it's, we don't want to give certain drugs if they have these conditions. And so they were, giving me some. I was pretty much jaundice, which that basically just means that the red blood cells are breaking down, and they're so much, and it's in the body that you basically your skin pigment can kind of turn yellow.
So, and
And
I'll
so,
tell you,
yeah,
so I was born jaundiced as well,
okay,
right? But like in this situation specifically, especially with what we're talking about today, jaundice is one of the symptoms of G6PD.
exactly.
Right.
Yep,
So, like,
yep.
even though both of us were born with it, for you, it was a symptom. For me, it was just, I don't know. I was pissed off at the world. My body is like, put me back in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it can happen from different other nutritive type of things too. And so, yeah, born jaundice and all this stuff. They didn't have the protocols that they're supposed to kind of have today with that, because
Mhm.
nowadays, African American baby born jaundice, now they might test for G6PD in that case. This time, pretty sure it wasn't being done.
Right.
And so, all these adverse effects, really sick, almost didn't make it, and but pulled through. And so, um, that just kind of carried on through my childhood as well. Um, no one knew anything, and I would have little dizzy spells and things, and just never made a big fuss about it. I was kind of a tough kid, running around siblings, things like that. We was running around the streets and stuff, and I just didn't take it as anything. So I never, told my parents or anybody about it. Small little dizzy spells, things like that. Um,
Well, and don't you have a lot of brothers and sisters?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. 7 of us
I
total.
come from a big family too, and I know, like, when there's a lot, not everybody gets a lot of attention. There's not a lot to go around.
Yep. I mean, I was the baby, so I was a little spoiled, but yeah, I just kind of, you don't, and this speaks to a lot of other issues as well, that like health issues with people on average or in general, they don't, if you don't know what to look for, you don't know what you might have or what those implications can be. So it's just something one paying attention to. I know I would get dizzy spells and just keep it moving. It happened for a few minutes, or maybe what felt like a few minutes, but just a few seconds, and then I just go back to playing.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, having these symptoms, not knowing nothing, eating all the stuff, drinking all the stuff, um, we can speak to the like poverty level and stuff, growing up as a minority and stuff, but access to certain types of foods, we was eating the po foods, the
Yeah.
poor foods, so
Mm-hmm.
literally welfare food is like canned chicken
Yeah.
and like spam
Hey,
and
believe it or not, I've spent days eating mustard sandwiches. So, yeah, I got you.
so peanut butter and that's one of the things I'm actually allergic to. Well, trigger, it's a trigger, but not only that, the cheap stuff got all the preservatives, all this, not even real synthetic, and so those preservatives are triggers as well. So just like multiplied with the things that I'm consuming and exposed to every day. And so just kind of growing up and stuff, I didn't feel like it necessarily affected my intelligence or my IQ or anything like that. I excelled in school. Um, Now I do feel like it did. Like I feel like I could have even been smarter. So I think it did affect me, but it didn't affect me to where I was below average. So I was still performing. I was still, making it through and stuff. So I still didn't think anything of it.
Well, and so let
Um,
me ask you too, because you were growing up in like Chicago, right? In the 80s. I'm
a
gonna
little bit
guess.
in New York. Yeah,
Okay. And like a lower socioeconomic
yeah,
area. So
yeah.
I'm gonna guess that like the standards weren't super high to begin with for like how well you should be doing in school.
Yeah,
Right? And I'm
yeah.
not saying this as like a white elitist asshole, okay? Because like I said, I've spent my time eating
No,
sausage sandwiches, and
yeah,
like, I mean, I've been in places where I get a B or I do well, and they're like, "How'd you get that grade?" You know, and I'm like,
yeah,
"Hey, I'm smart."
yeah. Well, and then believe it or not, I left Chicago fairly young, 6 maybe.
Yeah.
I went back, a handful of times over my life, but a lot of schooling in upstate New York, and that's actually a super high curriculum, a
Okay.
super high level education, and so still excelled pretty well.
Nice.
And then just basically found out I had G6PD in the military. So joined in the military at 17 years old. I did the dual or the split option for enlistment.
Mhm.
You join your junior year, go to basic training that summer, come back to finish your senior year, graduate, and go to your advanced individual training that summer after you graduate, and then you're full time enlisted and you go about your business. So we went to the initial, I forgot what they call it, MEPS. They call it
Mhm.
MEPS. So it's
Mhm.
where you go through processing and they give you like 15 shots, and some of those I was probably allergic to, but they did the test and came out and said, "Hey, just one thing, we want to note for you. You have this thing called G6PD. It's just an allergy to some fava beans and primaquine." Gave me a quick paper on it that I had a list of like 5 things and said, "Go about your business." And that's all I got when I got introduced to G6PD and what it is and my status.
And
Um,
that's still more than most people would have gotten
yeah,
back then, especially. I know research has gotten better, but it's still not great, which we'll talk more about. But like that's one of the things when it comes to institutionalized bias or racism, right? Is the military is one of the organizations where that is actually a lot less
yeah,
because you're a body. They don't
yep,
care quite as much what color you are
yeah,
because they just need you to do your job. And
yep,
so they do test for more things across,
yep,
a wider spectrum.
absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things, especially if and when you're getting deployed to malaria endemic countries, they're inoculating you or giving you shots for
Yep.
malaria. They
Yep.
have to consider the contraindications of the shots like primaquine, which is one of the primary shots that they give for anti-malarials. And so they have to check that because it can cause fatal adverse effects. And so I find out 17, I'm 17. I don't, first of all, I almost don't care because I'm like, oh, it's not nothing real serious
Yeah.
from the information that they gave me. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And they only gave me a list of a few things.
Mm-hmm.
I love beans, and beans are in the legume family, so
Right.
I continued eating beans. And to be honest, and we'll talk about this during the presentation, but there's certain levels of the G6PD that certain individuals might have, and based on your level, specific triggers might affect you differently. So, for instance, like black eyed peas, I can eat, black eyed beans, but
Not the
I
band.
can eat a whole bowl. I can eat a whole bowl of black eyed peas and not feel a thing. But if I eat 3 blueberries, 4 blueberries, I immediately start feeling some effects. So it can be, it's very versed, and there's a variety, and we'll get into it a little bit further. But continue eating my stuff here and there.
Well, and in the
Continue.
military, you don't always have a choice over what you're going to eat either.
Oh my goodness,
And I
so many.
remember so many times, like, like they served meat that I'm like, I'm not putting that in my body because I don't know what the fuck that is. And so I would eat things like beans, right? Because I'm like, I need protein. I need
Yeah.
to survive, but I'm not eating
So
that.
there was so many things in the military that I chose not to eat
Yeah.
because I started recognizing the symptoms around that time.
Mm.
I'm eating, the fake meat and all this stuff and a bunch of beans, lentils, because they're giving you your proteins, they're
Uh-huh.
giving you your carbs for the energy needs and all that, and they're giving you MREs, packaged meals with
Right.
all the preservatives you can think of and chemicals, and I'm eating this stuff and feeling all types of ways all the time. And so just still pushing through, trying to avoid the things that are kind of making me feel bad, but
Mm.
still didn't really put two and two together until I actually got older and started doing more like research and thinking about the long term or chronic implications for G6PD. And so, yeah, go through my young adulthood,
Mhm.
um, just you know, eating some things, starting to taper down, but it's just so difficult. Even as a well educated person who literally studies and researches G6PD and public health, it's still very hard for me to avoid these triggers. So
Well, and there's not a lot of information out there. Like, because before this episode, I actually went out and, I've done some research here and there.
yeah,
And I like a little bit. So I dug in, not, for days or anything, but I did a little digging and there's nothing simple or easy or clear. Like,
yeah,
it's like, hey, a bunch of people have it, and this is what it is, and here's a list of things that might affect you. But the list was like 10 bullets. And I'm
exactly.
like, I know there's way more based on like conversations you and I have had. So, yeah, there is a huge lack of research regarding this, especially with how devastating of a genetic disorder it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's really my primary mission is to raise the awareness and
Mhm.
to, let people know, hey, you should probably get checked for this and then find out, get the resources on all the things you can do to do your own research, get all the resources with everything that we have.
Yeah.
Try to get some comprehensive information out there and then and just try to help people because they probably don't know. They're probably being affected, even if they don't have the symptoms. There still can be long term implications, and I think there's probably the big correlations with some of the primary disorders and diseases. So that's what we're going to be getting into.
Well, right. And it's like, I mean, it's similar, but not the same. But like people who have gluten sensitivities,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And like now it's like all the rage. Everybody knows about the gluten stuff. But I remember when it was first becoming a thing and people were like, I had a couple friends that like they didn't realize they had celiac disease,
yeah, yep.
right? It wasn't
Crohn's,
severe. Like I know some were
Crohn's.
severe, but like,
Mhm.
yeah, they were eating bread like it was nothing because they didn't know, they didn't understand. And then when they
Yeah,
stopped, my God, they all of a sudden felt like $1 million, like a different person. So I
yep,
think with any of this type of stuff, and what's interesting, and I know you're going to tell us more about it, is like, yeah, it's like an allergy, but there's also like triggers for a lot of these
yeah,
symptoms too. And it kind of reminds me of like, when you have to figure out what's screwing with you, you have to dial everything back. Like
yeah,
if it's a food allergy, you stop eating all the things and then slowly start integrating it back in and seeing, what
yeah,
messes you up. And it sucks and it takes time and it's terrible. But like you said, there's long-term effects for this, not just short. So it's
yeah.
important.
And I think that really leads right into kind of where I'm at now in my
Mhm.
life and my health. And so, really starting to notice the long term effects of
Yes.
it. And, there's some research out there, and some of the research that I'm doing is basically, um, you know, the different ways that it can affect you long term. And so all the way from, disorders like, Alzheimer's, dementia, seizures that I've actually had a few in my life now. Um, you know, Thank goodness that they're only when exposed to like high levels of these triggers. So they're what we call provoked seizures. I've only had a couple, but it's very, very serious. It, can do damage to the neural pathways,
Yeah.
cause and lead to the dementia and the Alzheimer's and things. So it's a real a realization that I've came to in the last few years that are how much of a priority this is to not only for myself, but for so many other people, and I really want to try to get ahead of this and get this out so people, maybe we can make some huge impacts on some of these leading causes of like death
Yeah,
and
yeah. I mean,
disease and
sometimes all
depression.
it takes is somebody, even like they don't even watch the episode, right? But maybe they just see like the title and they're like, "What's G6PD?" And then they Google it and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, you never know. You got to talk about this kind of stuff because you never know how you're going to impact somebody. So, you sent me a beautiful slide deck that really goes into like the information that you've been working on. I know as a grad student. So, if you are listening to this versus watching it, don't worry. We're going to talk about and read the information on the slide deck that we're about to show. If you want to see it, though, you can always watch it on the YouTube, my YouTube channel. I'll put it up on the following Wednesday, so tomorrow. So, without further ado, boom. All right. So, I'm going to let you lead the way. Tell us all about it.
Absolutely. Let's go back to that first screen real quick. I want to express this title.
Yes, sir.
G6PD is a silent crisis, honestly, especially for people of color, primarily African American males. But let's talk some more about it. So go ahead and next slide.
Right.
So G6PD, the name of it for the nerds out there, glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. And it's an understudied and underaddressed in healthcare and public health, contributing to this silent crisis. So many people and physicians are unaware of the condition itself, whether they have it. Physicians don't even know much about it. And so your doctors might not even know much about this either. And they may not know about the triggers. Many of the triggers, they might know some, but not all of them, or the health implications, whether short-term or long-term implications. So G6PD causes thousands of deaths worldwide each year for both adults and neonates, so babies, newborns, as well as the diagnosis of correlated chronic diseases. So it's very serious, and so we're going to talk a little bit more.
So I will tell you, because I get my healthcare through the VA, and I was seeing my doctor last week, and I was like, "Hey, on my podcast next week, we're going to be talking about G6PD, blah, 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 blah. Have you heard of it?" And she was like, "Huh." And then she goes, "Oh, wait, I do." And she like knew like the whole name. And I was like, "Oh, I knew you were awesome."
Nice.
Yeah.
Some people have some of the info.
She's amazing. And she's also, I would say, a younger generation of doctor.
Okay, awesome, good. Yeah, exactly, and that's what we want to get to. Some of these younger generations, I mean, as more information becomes exposed and more research studies, there are clinical trials and there are research happening. So there is hope for people out there that's kind of getting scared and getting worried. There's definitely hope, and that's what we're doing here today. So it's estimated to affect over 400 million people worldwide and is the most common enzyme deficiency in the world. So an enzyme just is part of our system that breaks things down in the in metabolism or in our like digestive system in our bodies. An enzyme helps to break down components. So when you consume things, it helps to break down those components. When you can't break those components down, you have issues. And so this is an enzyme deficiency. So there's not enough of this enzyme. So around almost 3% of people in the world are affected.
Mm-hmm.
So just let that sink in a little bit. That's 400 million people, almost
It's a lot.
3% of people.
Yeah.
That's 1 out of 10 African American males in the US. So count 10 of your black male friends right now.
Mm-hmm.
One of them probably has G6PD. So tell them about this. Tell them to get checked.
Yeah.
So, and some studies even suggest that it's closer to 1 out of 7. So, well, actually, sorry, they're saying, yeah. So 1 out of 7 is even a higher prevalence. So
Mm-hmm.
that's terrible.
Right.
So it's a significantly higher prevalence in African American males than the next highest group, which is the Asian and Mediterranean descent. So if you're Asian, if you're Mediterranean, anywhere in the Middle East, Indian, all of it, Arab countries, all of them. So Mediterranean and Asian, they are the second highest prevalence of this. There is a pretty big gap. So African American males are significantly higher, but Asian and Mediterranean still suffer from this pretty significantly. So other than African American males in the military, like Dr. Campbell was saying,
Mm-hmm.
only symptomatic individuals, high risk neonates or high risk, births, or those with jaundice are tested despite this extremely high prevalence. So that's, we should be tested for this, and more than just people that are high risk or symptomatic.
Yep.
So
and
next slide, please.
Well,
Yep,
and I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, and that's again because the military needs to know what's up with everybody. So they just test everybody right off the bat, right?
Mhm.
And like you mentioned, even though you don't have severe symptoms, you may still be dealing with reactions to this. And so it is
Absolutely.
really important to get tested.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. We ready? Moving on
Yes,
to the next
ma'am.
slide. Okay.
So, and she was saying this was a beautiful slide deck. I didn't do much cosmetic stuff to this, so if and when y'all get this later, it may or may not look better. I literally put the info here. This is just the info.
The
So what
information
is
is beautiful because it's important, Cortez.
it is, and I thought I figured that's how you address that. So what is it exactly? It's a DNA gene mutation. So we get, most of us know that we get, chromosomes from one parent and chromosomes from the other parent that come to meet and they divide and they make up your DNA. And so this is just a quick little depiction of kind of what it is. That's inside every single cell in our body. You can go deeper and look at your chromosomes and look at your DNAs. And inside your DNA is what we call the nucleotide, which is a string of these like DNA sequences that have all these like letters that represent your genetic code. And this genetic code or gene sequencing tells your whole body what to do. So it tells how much enzymes to produce. It tells how much, blood to pump in this area of the body. It tells what your heart rate is. It tells it just gives your whole body all the instructions. So DNA is obviously very important. What happens, if you're able to see this, you can look and see that there's 3 different types of mutations. There's a substitution where one base pair is substituted for another one. So one letter gets switched with another, where so it's supposed to be one letter, but it gets switched to another. And that just causes a gene mutation. There's a deletion where literally just the gene is gone. And then there's an addition where some extra one gets added in for some reason. And so G6PD is a substitution. So it's basically where, in for those nerds again, a C gets replaced with an A if you want to kind of know the code. And so it gets replaced. This in what specific gene this is, it's actually the G6PD gene. So it's a gene that tells the body how much of the G6PD enzyme to produce. So the G6PD gene tells how much of G6PD enzyme to make. If this substitution has happened, this mutation has happened, now the G6PD gene is telling the body not to make enough of the G6PD enzyme. So now you have an enzyme deficiency of G6PD. Next slide, please.
Yes, sir.
Here is how it's passed on. So we got up on the left side, it's X-linked and it's recessive. So if the father actually has it, which I do, so we can use me as an example, it's on and the males have X and Y chromosome. Females have just 2 X's. So you get one from each parent, like we said again. So here's all the ways that they can get mixed. So all the way to the left, you have a male, a son, who would have an X and a Y, because a male has an X and a Y.
Mm-hmm.
So that X, if it came from your father, because your mother has 2, if the mother is unaffected, father has the mutation, you're gonna get one of those good X's from your mother. So my son will not have it because my partner does not have a defective X. We go over to the next one. If your daughter will be a carrier. So if the father is affected, has the bad X, the mother has both good X's, because the daughter is getting 2 X's, she's going to get one from her mother, but she's going to get that bad X from the mutated X from the father. So she's going to be a carrier. Right. So 1 X is good. So that means the G6PD gene in that good X chromosome is going to produce enough of the G6PD enzyme so she won't actually be affected. So she won't have the symptomology, she won't be affected, but she will be a carrier.
Yeah, this was part of the research that I found so interesting, because like when we talked about the numbers, like there are women of color who are affected, but it's so small in comparison to males, right? And so then when I found out it's carried on the X chromosome, it makes so much more sense, because the healthy, with the women that have, or females that have 2 X chromosomes, the healthy one will overwrite the one that is giving the wrong directions, essentially, exactly. Right? It's exactly. Like, no, you're wrong. We're going this way. Exactly. But even though she doesn't have symptoms, she's still a carrier. And so she can give it to her son, and she can make her daughter a carrier as well. Exactly. So can women get tested to know, even if they don't have symptoms, just so they know what they might be passing on to their children?
Exactly. That's exactly right. They can get tested, and everyone can get tested, and it is good to know, and that's absolutely what I recommend.
Awesome.
And so as we continue on, we got another son who might be unaffected, because again, he might get the mother's good X and be good to go. Well, he's got to get, if the mother is unaffected, he's going to get a good X. And so that means he'll be good to go. And then lastly, on this side, if the father is affected and the mother is not affected, you got another daughter who might be a carrier as well. Yeah. So,
yep. And again, this is all it's just creating awareness, right? Mm-hmm. So that even if you don't have symptoms, if you end up being a carrier and you have children, you know what to look for. Or you can just make sure that you eliminate possible triggers from your home until they get tested and you know for sure.
Yep. So right? my grandson, so if I have a daughter and she has a son, he's 50-50 chance right now. Right. Just as it stands.
Yeah.
50-50 might happen. And so, and we'll get into more of those statistics about the family And so basically, if my mother, which we're going to get into it because my mother was the carrier, so that's what we're getting into next. But so now, if the father is unaffected, but the mother is the carrier, my mother was the carrier.
Mm-hmm.
She's African American. My father is Puerto Rican. My mother is Native American and African American. And so I'm pretty sure we got that strand from our African American heritage. And she was a carrier. And here's where it shows the son is going to be affected with a mother that's a carrier. Or I think, sorry, there's a 50% chance. I'm sorry. 50% chance because he can get her good X or her bad X.
And
He's
so
gonna
also genetically, you're a quarter African American from what I just heard, right?
well, the way that Ancestry has it,
Well, but that's right. I mean, genetically, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know my Native American is pretty I'm only in the teens with that
Okay.
percentage.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yep,
So a
and
little bit.
then
Okay.
yep,
Because I'm just saying, like, so even someone that's not, 100% African American, it's important. It's an important thing to notice or distinction. You should still probably get tested. Like if you have like my niece. Well, my niece and both of my nephews are part African American, right?
mhm,
So this is something that they should get tested for.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, yep. And so the son, if the mother's the carrier, the father is not. Any sons have a 50% chance. So
Yeah.
literally 1 out of 2. Um, you know, 1 out of, I think it ends up being um, 1 out of 4 sons of a mother that's a carrier because uh, if you, let's see how it, I can't remember quite how this graph doesn't show it,
That's
but
all
I
right.
think, yeah, I think the statistics, for some reason, they broke it down and said 1 out of 4.
Yeah.
But this graph shows like it's damn near a 50% chance.
All right.
So
So,
basically, I have 4 brothers from my mother. So I do believe one of my other brothers do have it, and
right.
I'm trying to get him tested. He keep refusing, but I'm gonna get him tested soon.
Right.
Yep.
All right.
And then lastly, if the mother is a carrier, um the daughter, like we said, 50% chance that the daughter is going to be a carrier. Or sorry, 25% chance that the daughter is going to be a carrier.
Gotcha. All right.
Yep. All right,
Okay.
next slide.
You got it.
So here's a table about the different types of G6PD deficiency or variants, what we call them. So there's this all might look a little confusing, but basically the old or what we call the legacy World Health Organization classification system that they had, probably 10, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They've changed that now. So those old classifications were just considered 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now they've been switched over to the new as of 2022, so fairly new. The new classifications are A, B, and C, and each class is based off of how much of the enzyme that we have or we can produce. And so, as you can see, either if you look at the legacy number 1 or classification A, it's don't look at the median activity, but the level of the residual enzyme or the level of the activity. So less than 10% of the enzyme activity, that is either class A or level 1. So that's very chronic, as you can see, hemolysis. So it's kind of uncommon and it's pretty rare. So they just named that variant a uncommon or rare variant.
And so when you get tested, do they assign you one of these levels?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And so the next level class B or level 2, if you might still have less than 10%, but you may only have some hemolysis, what we call acute, based on your triggers and like when you consume in all these triggers. And that is what they would call the Asian or Mediterranean descent, or the
Gotcha.
variant, Asian or Mediterranean variant. So most of Asians or Mediterranean who have G6PD have this amount. And then the and then and I'm sorry. So those were the legacy,
Okay.
as well as um, classification number 3 is considered the African American or African variant. Or it used to be called A minus as well, so it was kind of weird.
Okay.
We have between 10 and 60% of the normal level of this enzyme. So now they've reclassified both the Asian and Mediterranean variant and the African variant, both under classification of B, and they just label it overall that if you just have less than 45% of the activity, then then that's the classification.
So if
Um,
you don't mind sharing, are you in the middle there somewhere?
I'm right there, yeah. So my levels were right around somewhere between 10 and 13% of the enzyme activity. So I have pretty um, chronic or pretty severe of the enzyme deficiency.
Okay.
And
And I
that's
just
why,
I just was wanting to point that out so that if anyone watches this or listens and they're like looking at the symptoms you've had versus any they might have,
yeah,
they can see a difference in severity.
absolutely. And then the last one is classification, legacy classification number 4, or the new classification C. Basically, they still consider this level normal, but if you have 60% all the way up to 150%, because some people, believe it or not, actually have more than 100%. I'm jealous, but that's what they call like a wild variant, and it's weird, but there's no health implications for that, negative health implications.
Okay.
So those are all the variants, and we'll go ahead and move on.
All right.
This is a quick list of just things that we want to kind of watch out for.
Now, hang on one second.
Yeah.
So before we go through the list, we're going to talk about the symptoms of all of, like, what the symptoms are, right?
We're probably going to get into the symptoms a little bit later.
Okay.
And this is
Anyone
really
like
just
wondering, we'll
yeah,
get to
and
the
this is
symptoms.
really just a quick list.
Okay.
And I'm not actually even going to go through this whole list. I just want to give it for people that's watching or go back and look at it later. Just look at these very common things, and then we're gonna be providing a more comprehensive list to people. And even the comprehensive list is not exhaustive, so
Okay.
we're still researching. We're still finding more and more things. So, but anyway, just to describe a little bit, it's a deficiency of the G6PD enzyme.
Mm-hmm.
It is a protein for the nerds out there. It's in the protein classification, and it's part of our daily metabolism. So it's part of the triple P pathway, the pentose phosphate pathway. It's part of regular everyday metabolism. So even when we don't eat or drink nothing, we need G6PD to still run regular bodily functions.
Right.
It's for the production of NADH. I won't say the name of that long name, and glutathione, and all of those break down reactive oxygen species, which prevents oxidation and hemolysis, which is destruction of oxygen carrying red blood cells. So all that verbiage is just to say we don't got enough of the enzyme. When we eat stuff that is oxidated, when we know we always talk about, hey, you should eat more antioxidants, eat blueberries, eat these things, eat antioxidants. It's to stop oxidation. It's to stop hemolysis or destruction of red blood cells. and red blood cells carry oxygen to the whole body. So you can imagine if you are destroying red blood cells, you're not carrying oxygen to virtually all parts of your body, which has every implication you could possibly think of, really. So anyway, that's kind of a quick breakdown of kind of more in detail what it is still. The quick list right in front of us, exercise itself. Like I said, metabolism, daily metabolism, we need G6PD. So if you start exercising real hard, you need more G6PD enzyme to break down what we call like lactic acid. So when you're doing anaerobic exercise or exercise like HIIT training, high intensity interval training and stuff, and or running sprints, and you're not doing slow exercise where your aerobic exercise, you're able to get enough oxygen to support what you're doing. Anaerobic exercise, you're not necessarily getting enough oxygen in, so it starts pulling it from your muscles, which causes lactic acid buildup or oxidation in the muscles in the body. What do we need to break down that oxidation? We need G6PD enzyme. If we're deficient in this, so when you're exercising, especially anaerobic, you might feel lightheaded. You might get some symptoms if you have G6PD. So that's just one big thing to note. All consumables, like we said, here's a quick list. Legumes, which is all beans, peas, lentils, malt, soy, molasses, peanuts, blueberries, bitter millet, other millets, alcohol, tonic waters, black and green teas at high doses, coffee and caffeine, and even cacao, chocolate, high doses, preservatives, even vitamin C, high doses of what we call ascorbic acid. They use that in every single thing.
Well, and corn. So corn syrup, right?
Yeah, mostly high doses. So like mostly like high fructose corn syrup.
Which is in like all kinds of cheap, sugary, nasty food.
Exactly. Food dyes, food coloring, a bunch of drugs and pharmaceuticals, and so many more things. Next page, please.
So basically all the cereal that I loved growing up as a child.
Literally. Yeah. I've only found like one, maybe two actual cereals that I actually eat right now.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yep. And otherwise I kind of make my own. So on to more list. Aromatics can affect people with G6PD too. Aromatics is literally anything we can smell, anything in the air. Aerosol sprays. This can include cleaners, like this can even include house sprays. What do you call them? The house sprays.
Air fresheners.
Air fresheners. Yeah. Air fresheners. Any smoke, even just burning a fire outside, burning wood, smoking yourself, cigarettes, tobacco, mothballs. Stay away from the mothball, the fumes. Fuels like gasoline and diesel and all that. Hemp products, henna. I'm getting to that in topicals too. But and many traditional Chinese herbs. So you know how hard it is for me when I'm doing holistic stuff and incorporating holistic foods and things, and I want to use herbs and many herbs, and especially traditional Chinese herbs, also cause hemolysis is very hard.
Well, and I would also say, I mean, I have a lot of friends that work with traditional Chinese medicine and people who use it in their own practices. So if you are of African American descent or Middle Eastern descent and you notice like some of the symptoms we're going to talk about, maybe get checked.
Yeah, that's right.
G6PD, yeah.
Yep. We got topicals, so things we put on, lotions, just anything you put on your skin. Our skin is the biggest organ in the body. It absorbs stuff, and it can go straight in the bloodstream. Henna, which is similar to like tattoos, tattoo ink, hemp products. So if you ever use those CBD pain sticks, it can affect you. marijuana itself, hemp products, hemp is marijuana, all that THC, CBD, all of it, Delta 8, all of it, mint, spearmint, camphor, all of these things that we imagine is like traditional things to heal can
Right.
cause hemolysis in people with G6PD. There's
Just
many, many
because it's
more.
healthy doesn't mean it's healthy for you.
That's right.
Right.
All right, next, there's many, many more. We're not going to go exhaustive. These are all common things. There's so many more. So, short-term implications or symptoms that you might have, uh, it can range from people that don't even notice it because it's so mild, or actual mild ones where you might have an issue, but you just kind of brush it off like, I don't know what that was. But like many people have quick little dizzy spells or kind of days off or sea stars or floaties and things like that. And people just kind of be like, whatever, that's not nothing, just keep it moving. All the way to severe symptoms where you can literally get dizzy and kind of fall. You can literally, like I said, even seizures. So here's some of these, all the range of these symptoms. You can see floaties. You can have just brain fog or cognitive issues. You can even, the more cognitive stuff, you can even like have short-term like amnesiatic episodes where you literally can look at a word and not even be able to like say the word, even if it's an easy word. You can spell it out, but you can't pronounce what it is. Fatigue, lightheadedness, tunnel vision, deficits, like I said, cognition and executive functioning. And like I said, transient global amnesia is for the nerds or for the healthcare practitioners. Short-term memory loss, and like we said, seizures. Keep going. Let's go to the next.
Well, and you say short term, but this is also acute, right? So these are the things that happen that can come on like quickly.
Exactly what we would call short term. So not the long term or chronic
Right.
implications like that you've had this for years and you've been eating things for years. That's all chronic implications. This is all short term or acute, like she said, short term. If you eat this stuff right away, you might have some of these symptoms, whether you notice it or not.
And I think this is also important too, that like as we get older, this stuff becomes more like, well, is it from this or is it from that? Right.
Yeah,
I mean, at
exactly.
least for me. But as
Exactly.
a kid, if you have a kid that's dealing with any of this stuff, like don't brush it off. Like make sure to pay attention and go get tested. I'll just keep saying that the whole podcast.
Just say it the
Go
whole.
get tested.
I'm gonna keep saying it too, and that's right. People mistake these symptoms with other things. So if you've been searching, if you've been having some of these symptoms, and you've been searching for things, and your doctor's been searching for things and can't find stuff, and they don't put you on pharmaceutical medications, get tested for this. All right, long-term or chronic implications. For the nerds out there, they are familiar with the motherfucker gene. So the MTHFR gene mutation linked. It's linked to neurological disorders by way of the deficits in the NADPH and glutathione. So this helps with methylfolate recycling and V-core mutation-like deficits in our vitamin K recycling. So those are the two main things, the types of genes that are being affected. So these cycles, the motherfucker and the V-core, they're systems that affect our neurological pathways and our vitamin K pathways. So it's how we process these things. So methylfolate and vitamin K and stuff are used for so many bodily processes. And so reactive oxygen species, ROS, like we talked about before, things that cause oxidation or oxidative stress. So ROS mediated qualitative and or quantitative cellular degeneration or cell loss in the frontal cortex, that's in the brain, the cerebellum, the hippocampus, all of those can be affected, as well as having an increased DNA oxidation in the same regions of the brain. All that verbiage is to talk about the potential destruction of brain cells, the buildup of these tau proteins and amyloid plaques and tangles. That might ring a bell for some scholars. That's what can lead to what we know as dementia and Alzheimer's. Those are the primary, what we know correlations of causes in dementia and seizure. Well, actually, all of the stuff in the brain. So, memory loss, decline in cognitive performance, psychological disorders, seizures, dementia, Alzheimer's, things in the body as well. Anemia, we know that's associated with so many other things. Um, People with like Crohn's disease, celiacs, they have associations with anemia, which can cause, you know, susceptibility to infectious disease and allergies and allergic conditions. Um, you can feel cold, even hyperthermic type of issues when it ain't even there.
And what's really interesting here is that the last four that you have, the hypertension, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and then declining kidney and liver function. Like when I was doing my research on like healthcare and the lack of research around G6PD, one of the things that came forward is even though morbidity rates and mortality rates are getting better for people of color and minorities in the United States, they're still at a significant disadvantage. And the areas where the numbers are still way higher than their white counterparts is hypertension, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and kidney and liver function.
Absolutely.
So
those are the top 4,
interesting
5.
correlation, huh?
Yeah. Top 4 or 5 killers in the world, and well, primarily the U.S., but even in the world, there's a couple that are flopped with a couple of other things. But yeah, top 4 or 5 in the world or in the U.S. So get if you got hypertension, heart disease, and all this, especially if you're African American or Asian or Mediterranean, and they don't, trying to blame it on some other stuff, go get tested.
Right.
Here we go. What we trying to do? Well, so about treatments and cures. There's definitely no cure right now. The treatments. If they test you and find out you have it, they give you a short list of some of the things that we mentioned earlier, and they say stay away from this stuff, and that's it, and you'll live a happy life. It's almost impossible to stay away from all this stuff, and they still don't consider that even if you are exposed to some of these things and you're not having symptoms, you can have some of those long-term implications that we mentioned.
And can I just take a minute too to just like recognize that when you go to a doctor or whatever and they say, yeah, just stay away from all this stuff or go change your whole lifestyle, like that's really hard. Like I was forced into basically a vegan diet like that one day because of healthcare issues, and like they make it seem so simple. And so for anyone that's looking at this and is like, wait, what? It's not easy, but it's worth it, right? So like
absolutely. And they make you, like she said, they make you, and I'm not speaking for all physicians, all healthcare practitioners. Right. Like public health has came a long damn way, especially like she said, for minorities and things. I'm in public health, and it's we're coming a long way. It's not better. But the lack of education, specifically on G6PD, even in public health, is not comprehensive and not exhaustive. So
my whole point is just don't get overwhelmed. Like if you can't do everything all at once, that's okay. Do the best you can, right? Is all I mean. Like do the best you can with what you got.
Hit me up. I got you. we gonna provide resources for y'all when we're done.
So we're running out of time, Cortez. So let's go.
Yeah. This whole thing is just to raise awareness about getting tested. First, go to your primary care provider if you got one. If you don't, you can find rapid on-site tests, and you can go to third-party labs to get tested. we're going to be providing resources for prevention about how to avoid known triggers. We can get into further supplementation and things like that. There's a lot of things that we can potentially do to try to help us produce more of the enzyme and things like that, or stop oxidation. There are clinical trials going on about stuff with gene therapy and transfusions. And we definitely want to start petitioning, so be on the lookout for that on my website and stuff like that, because I'm going to be putting in this research and trying to raise awareness and trying to petition to make the public health and healthcare people test for this more often than they do.
Now, do you have a newsletter or something like that, Cortez, where people can keep in touch with you?
Yeah, it's going to be just basically through the website for now.
Okay.
So we don't have to show the references, but that'll wrap up everything. But
okay.
Basically, CortezTrainingCenter.com, and just there's an about section. Look at the whole website, find out all the information on there. There's some quick information about G6PD, but you can go to about and you can reach out to me if you have more questions about G6PD and resources, other than what we're going to provide to you on here.
Yeah, so I'm also going to add just a few links from stuff that I found around G6PD. Not a lot, just a couple. But then also, we didn't talk a ton about it, but I think it's really important that we understand institutionalized racism and structural bias and implicit bias and how that affects the healthcare system, how that contributes to the lack of research into something like this. It's really important that we understand that, because by becoming aware of that, acknowledging it and talking about it, it allows more people to gain access to funding to do research for this type of stuff. And, it saves people's lives. It's kind of a big deal. So I know that
it's starting to save. I'm trying to save my own life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that of all your kids too, right? And that may come someday. And so I will add links to some of that information if you want to look at it from a more academic perspective, perhaps, and really look at the numbers. Cause I know, they share stuff on Instagram or whatever, but sometimes looking at the numbers and seeing the research is what helps bring it home for people. So I'm going to link a few articles as well, either in the comments or in the text of the post that's attached to this video. And then I know, and we didn't talk about this, Cortez, but I'm going to surprise you. So I know Cortez is a graduate student, and this is research that he's working on, and he wants to be more involved in this type of stuff and really take it forward. So if anybody knows of anyone doing research into genetic disorders that would be interested in doing work with this kind of stuff, please connect them with Cortez and help him get the word out and do more work in this area, because it's needed.
Absolutely. CortezTrainingCenter.com, Cortez Training Center, Facebook, all the good stuff. Hit us up.
Awesome. All right, my dear. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. I always learn so much in these episodes because, I know cool people. I'm just lucky like that. But I really do appreciate your time. I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing your story and the work that you're doing in all of this, right? Because it's hard, and I'm glad that you're doing it. I'm glad you're taking care of yourself. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for what you do and for bringing me on. And we're going to do this again. I'm going to come on more and more. I'm going to be a regular here. So let's go.
Maybe next time we'll talk about Veterans Yoga Project, because I know you just had an MRT.
Let's do it. Yes,
awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Again, if you want to see the slideshow and you missed it and you've been listening, it'll be up on my YouTube channel on Wednesday, tomorrow. And this is what is episode 20? Okay. All right. Take care, everybody.
Let's go.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Energetic Psyche for episode 20. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you'll join us again in the future. We live stream every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you miss it, you can always listen to it again on Spotify or YouTube. Have a great week.